A University of Michigan graduate and former public information officer with the U.S. Air Force Strategic Air Command, John W. Felton has had a distinguished career in public relations. After the Air Force, Felton joined Interstate Brands Corporation as Director of Public Relations and Public Affairs in 1969, where he was responsible for the promotion of the Charlie Brown Specials, among others. He then joined the ranks of the McCormick Spice, where he and his staff were responsible for public relations activities at 85 locations around the world. He was also the Freedom Forum Distinguished Visiting Professor at the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications, and for 10 years served as President and CEO of the Institute for Public Relations, headquartered at the university. He is a past president of the Public Relations Society of America. Felton has also been recognized for his professional writings that include 2 books and 8 plays, several of which have received awards. His dedication to his career and love of public relations has not gone unrecognized. He has been awarded the Outstanding Professional of the Year by PR News and was named the recipient of the Gold Anvil, PRSA's highest award. His most recent honors include the 1999 David Ferguson Award for Outstanding Contributions to PR Education and the Alexander Hamilton Medal from the Institute for Public Relations in 2004.
Well, leadership in public relations is not that different than leadership in other fields. I think Dwight Eisenhower did a good job before the D-Day in trying to get his generals together, and he walked into the room and shocked everybody by pulling a string up a long table. And they looked at him and wondered what he was doing. He went to the end and tried to push the string. You see, a string doesn't push. You've got to lead and you got to pull. And I think leadership is developing the right kind of pulls of talents from people. You pull, if you can, the best talents you can and make that work. I think truth would have to be number one. Integrity, you have to be trusted. And if you're trusted by the CEO, by the financial officer and the other people, and by the employees, then you have a much better chance of getting your communications through. I think you also have to be someone who keeps digging. Perseverance is part of the job too. I think a lot of PR people give up too easily when someone says no, and I think sometimes you need to come back again and say, but what about, or how about, and keep trying. Persevering is really, I think, part of what we do. And the other thing is a sense of responsibility. You're in charge of projecting the image of an organization, and you have a responsibility that you better feel you carry and feel it's really an important part of your job. I got in the field after thinking I was going to be a television producer and write and produce television shows. The Korean War was on. I was assigned to a general, and they said, Lieutenant, I understand you can write. And I said, yes, sir, but what? Because I wasn't sure where he was going. And he said, well, you see this stack of OERs? And I said, yes, sir. He said, those are officers' effectiveness reports. And he says, I have the best daggone officers in the Air Force, but I can't get them promoted because the reporting officers can't describe their performance well enough to get the promotion. He said, here's what I want you to do. First assignment, take these reports, go back to the reporting officer, write what the officer really wants to say about that particular pilot, and get him to sign it, to agree to it, and then bring him back to me, and let's see what happens. I said, yes, sir. So I did just that, brought him back, and about 3 weeks later, the sergeant came to my office and said, Lieutenant, the general wants to see you in his office right this very minute. And I thought, uh-oh, what's up? And I walked in and they were all sitting on his desk. And I didn't know the general at the time had a great sense of humor. And as a brand new second lieutenant, why, he was teasing a little bit. He said, Lieutenant, you see these, with a real serious look on his face? And I said, yes. And he said, I want you to know, everyone you rewrote got promoted. You now have a job, and you're going to write anything I want you to write. Do you understand that? And I said, yes, sir. And so I got into the PR field through that kind of writing, and then working with the general at that level was the best executive experience you could ever have, because he really knew how to be a leader, he knew how to be effective, he knew when to give the orders and how. And I would say for someone to have that kind of experience would be tremendous benefit in starting a career. When we had a president at PRSA who was in office and he misbehaved in the stock market, and I suddenly, because he resigned, had to take over the presidency of PRSA, and we were suddenly thrust into that kind of a situation where you have to clean up a pretty unhappy mess, and you have to try to get communications back on track. It's a very difficult time, and that's when you really know where your friends are and who will come in and give you a hand and say, Jack, I think you're doing a great job. How about trying this and that? And that's when you really know whether you have friends in a profession or not, is when you get into that kind of situation. I don't think many people think of Lincoln as a public relations person, but I do, because I guess just a recent Harvard Business Review quotes Lincoln as saying, character is the tree, reputation is the shadow. Now that's pretty perceptive for someone in that period of our history, and it shows how strategic he was in planning things like the Emancipation Proclamation. And my other hero is the former treasurer of the United States in his early days, Hamilton, who wrote so many of the Federalist Papers, and he did what some historians call the best PR in the history of the world, when he wrote strategic messages to each of the states as they met to vote. And those messages were all tailored to the particular interests of that group and written to persuade them to vote in favor of the kind of government we had. And he wrote those along with Madison, and it became a historic class of tailoring the message to the right audience at the right time to get the response you want. I'd like to believe, I'm not sure it's true, but I'd like to believe we, in some ways, carry more responsibility for being the truth carriers in organizations. Lawyers and accountants can get away sometimes with saying, well, we disclosed it was in footnote J on page 37 of the annual report 2 years ago. Well, to me, that's not complete disclosure. We all know that an annual report, maybe the shareholder looks at it 8 to 10 minutes and very rarely reads footnote J. And yet, to the lawyer, he, for legal reasons, has disclosed properly on paper. To the accountant, he'll say, well, we disclosed properly. Yet, we didn't get the message to the person that was supposed to get the message, and we didn't make an effort to tailor the message to them so they could understand it.
Nonprofit versus government.
I think truth and trust and responsibility are still the things that are hallmarks of people who perform well and who succeed in the field. I think volunteering for charitable organizations, I think volunteering for a cause you really believe in puts you in the right kind of a framework. If you really believe in Boys and Girls Club or helping children with disabilities or whatever your cause is, I think work to where your heart is. And I think then the other things are going to naturally follow, because you're going to be truthful, you're going to be dedicated, you're going to take responsibility for what goes on. I think they really need to do what a lot of them have been doing, finding the right kind of an internship that's right for that student. You know, we can say, well, let's just give them internships. Well, as you know, there are all kinds of internships. There are internships where you really get hands-on experience and really get your hands dirty or clean or washed in the field. And I think we need to put them in more real life situations, and sometimes they're hard to find. They're very hard to find. And I think part of the job of the educator is to sell the really good organizations on the idea of their responsibility to train future leaders and get them to take interns in positions that they maybe didn't think they wanted to do. I think it's both. I think it can be taught. I learned from the general. I think there's an inherent feel that people have certain charisma that attract other people, and I think good leaders also have that kind of an aura about them. People like to be with people who are successful, and I think you want to be with someone who you think and believe you can follow, and you're going to get somewhere by doing it. I think Betsy Plank, in selling the concept, and I tried to help her. We were at the stage at PRSA where only 3 courses were required for someone to say on a diploma that they had a professional training in public relations. And we thought that needs to be jumped up to at least 5 or more. And we worked very hard. And a lot of the people at the assembly weren't going to vote for it because they thought if we make the requirement 5 courses in public relations, they'd lose their job because, or the school would lose its ability to be accredited because they didn't think they could sell their dean on the importance of 5 courses. Well, Betsy and I lost the vote the first time we went to the assembly, and we did some research and investigation to find out why, and found out that's why. And we came back to it at the next assembly, and I said, Betsy, get your boa. We're going to sell this one this time. And by golly, Betsy sold that. And it changed the profession because suddenly 5 courses became 6 courses and 7 courses. And the deans of the journalism schools discovered that that's right. It takes more than just 3 courses to turn someone into someone who has real qualifications for public relations. So I think that was a turning point for the whole profession. I think we're back to that very critical issue of truth. That's how Enron got in trouble. That's how many companies have gotten in, organizations gotten in trouble. They don't tell the truth to the shareholders and to their employees. And I found through all kinds of experiences that you're always better off if you tell the truth. Now, sure, there are ways to tell the truth, and there are ways to inoculate the audience, as some people call it, by telling them ahead of time what they're going to tell them and everything else. But I think if you basically tell the truth as you best can, you're going to succeed. Well, after teaching writing at University of Florida for 10 years, I'll tell you, I think writing is the essence. And you need to be able to write all kinds of things, and you need to explore different kinds of writing, but you also need to follow up your writing of speeches by working with the man who's going to give the speech or the lady that's going to give the speech. Too many times a great speech is written, but whoever is going to give it never practices it and doesn't read it out loud until they get in front of a podium, and then they sound like the cat saw the dog, and you know it's not their speech. So I used to make a pact with people I was writing speeches for. I did a lot of speech writing. I used to say, look, I'll write the speech, and I'm going to make it sound as much like you as I possibly can. But I need to hear you read me that copy back to make sure what I've written sounds like you, and it's the way it sounds when you say it. And by simply doing that, I never said we were going to rehearse. That would have insulted them. But I said, let's try, you know. And then I would change words as we went along. Every once in a while, say, well, let's change that word. I think you should say this there. So I tailored the speeches to fit the person like you tailor a good tailor can tailor a suit of clothes. It has to fit, and it has to fit properly. It has to drape just right, and it has to be appropriate for the setting. And if you can learn to write speeches like that and train the speaker so that he or she could become even more effective at the podium, you don't have to worry about a job. Somebody once said to one of my bosses, "What's Jack do for you?" And he said, well, number one, he makes the corporation look good. Number two, he makes me look good when I do speeches. And the third thing, he writes the best damn no letters of anybody I've ever seen. So I think writing skill is crucial. That's why, for my contribution, I went back to teaching, and I loved working with the students and helping them hone their skills in writing. I'd want to find out something about how dedicated they were, and I would get to that by asking them what kinds of things they had done as in high school and young adults that really sort of turned them on. And I want to see some kind of a spark of dedication with somebody I'm hiring. I think that, and I also then would say, well, okay, because of that, what did you do? What did you accomplish? And I would tie responsibility onto that sort of a person who comes with a commitment. If they're going to do something, they really are going to do it.